to open things up, I think the obvious thing to start with is about really what is unique and what is different about these instruments. Given the sort of keyboard focus of Céleste, maybe I'll start with the piano. Here I am looking at it and thinking, it's not black, what's going on? But is there anything else about it, other than it not being, black and quite as round as what maybe we're used to, that we should know about and that will help us understand what's unique about it?
So this is an original Fortepiano from 1835, and in the long progression of the history of the piano, we basically have a 6.5 octave range at this point, which is different from the approximately 8 octaves that we have on a modern piano. There is straight stringing, which allows for more of a clearer sound, and there's still a hammer action, but my favorite qualities of this instrument in particular are actually the extra pedals that you find, that at this point in piano history, the pedals were not standardized as you find on a modern piano these days. So these days you will find, on a modern piano, you will find the damper pedal, which we also have here, so it will make the sound, instead of being completely dry, it will make it held for longer. And then you also have a shifting pedal, also on the modern piano, and this is called the una corda pedal, so the entire action shifts, creating a softer sound. So I'm going to play the same chord, now with the una corda. So up till this point, we don't have so much difference between the pedals of what we find here and on a modern piano, but there are 2 extra special pedals on this instrument, and I really tried to utilize it in the slow movement of the Schubert that I played on its own. And it's called the Moderator and the Double Moderator. So the Moderator pedal actually, and in the intermission, everyone is definitely welcome to come up and look at this piece, but it's a piece of felt that's inserted when I press the pedal between the hammer and the strings, and it creates a more velvety, almost an ethereal kind of sound. So I'm going to play the same chord. And the double moderator is a little bit more nasal. So in my opinion, I really find that it's too bad that these special pedals, more attuned to quieter playing, got lost actually in our modern piano of today.
And just to conclude on that, I might just add, for a bit of Céleste Music trivia, that actually the name of the organization, right, Céleste Music, is inspired in part by the moderator on there, because in French, it's called the Jeu Céleste. And so we decided that the lyre, where the pedals are attached for this piano, would make a good logo for the organization, and from thence, Céleste Music was born. So a bit of trivia on that one too. So in terms of the visual differences for instruments, it might not be as obvious on the strings, although I do see, Chloe, for you, you've got some very nice a very nice fingerboard there and a cute little carved head. But aside from that, are there other, sort of organological differences in terms of your instrument?
Yeah, so maybe we can tag team a little bit, because we both have string instruments, and these are both from the 18th century, right? So we have original instruments. This is set up, that this transitional time period, it's like when some people have smartphones and some people still have flip phones. Not everyone has the same sort of technology. So I have essentially a Baroque violin. So it has, there's some ornate aspects to it, but during the transitional time, there would be a different bridge on to try to get a little bit of more action and a little bit more sustained power for larger venues. Maybe the violin maker, you can mention some of the specific differences of the string instruments.
Sure. As things progressed throughout the 18th and 19th centuries, many of these Baroque instruments were altered. So they had their necks, which is this bit, replaced. Sometimes it was just to standardize the length. People got kind of obsessed with everything being standardized. But in the Baroque period, it's, I think, same for the keyboard instruments. Everything was just all over the place. Like, the instruments were made more to sort of suit the player, made to, tailor-made size-wise and things like that. But as we went into the 19th century, people wanted sort of one size so you could jump from instrument to instrument very easily. So we replaced necks, which also had an effect on the sound. They actually sort of slanted them back a bit further, which sort of increased the sound production. A couple things inside, there's a bass bar that runs actually on this side of the instrument. You can't see it, obviously, because it's inside. But it creates a lot more structure and support for the instrument, and they made those a bit larger as well. But, so that altered some of the sound.
And a lot of the sound differences come from the fact that we're playing on gut strings rather than, synthetic steel material that you would find. Do we have any string players in here? By the way, some string players. Yeah, so and for violin, I have a very small chin rest and just a little something, but moving from that earlier in the terms of the violin, holding it more in the hand, and then as we extend sometimes very far, like my last note in that last Schubert up the fingerboard, we have a little bit more of holding it a little more stably with some of this help here, this technology of the chin rest to aid in shifting a bit more.
Yeah, and you'll notice the cello does not have an end pin. So that was pretty standard up until actually the early 1900s. A lot of people just held it between their legs. It's super comfortable. I don't get tired when I play it. Everyone always asks me. It's actually really nice. It's quite nice. And gut strings, interestingly, this cello was played for many decades by a guy named Martin Ormandy, who was the brother of Eugene Ormandy, the conductor of Philadelphia Orchestra. It was played in the New York Phil for many decades, and when he played it there, he was there starting in the 40s, they would have still been using gut strings because they lasted up until about the middle of the 20th century. People were still using them. So it's very neat to think about what was played on all of these instruments, really.
So I actually have a question for you two. What would you say are the advantages of gut strings? In terms of the tonal quality and the musicality?
The sound world in general has it's like a nutty, earthy flip. To me, it's like organic fruit versus like now when I go back, it's very fun. I play modern violin, but it's like high fructose corn syrup, or it's so bright and sparkling and beautiful in its way, but there's a whole other color palette that we're able to play around with. And it's just like having that whole new palette opened up in terms of maybe some more mellow colors and shades, but it really allows, especially in an intimate space like this, I think it creates a bit more nuance, and the reaction rate is also so quick with gut strings. You can really have some rhetorical, some gestures where you can really sink into the string, and it's not just about smooth, seamless bows and making everything the same, but really celebrating those differences and different parts of the bow feeling a little bit different from one another, and that the strings are very, very responsive in that way.
Yeah, and it's interesting that in the Baroque period, people were really fascinated with speech, with sounding like a great orator, and these gut strings actually really, more than a steel string, you can get a lot of bite and a lot of crunch, which doesn't sound very pretty when I do it right now, but it allows you to have so much more variety. Steel strings are a bit more sort of nice sounding and very even, and you can really just press into them and they work well, but this gives you a lot more sort of speech-like quality, sort of earthy, what you were saying. It's, one of our friends always compares it to sort of modern instruments like driving a Cadillac, and Baroque is more like a sports car. You can go faster, it's more exciting, maybe a little less comfortable.
Very nimble.
Yeah.
It's kind of the same on the piano, actually. That's one thing that you didn't mention, is that there's a bit of a register effect on the Fortepiano that you don't get as much on the modern piano. So modern pianos, they're very even. They don't go out of tune nearly as fast, which is a major advantage. But the sound quality is kind of pretty much the same everywhere. But there you have quite a growly bass and a very thin
Let me give
treble.
a demonstration of that, actually. So this was a quality of these instruments that was really, really prized at the time. And there are, within the 6.5 octaves, there are, in each register, I would say that there are about 3 registers with different tone colors. So I'm going to play the speaking voice, let's say, which is a very sweet sound, but if I go up to the higher notes, was described as wind instruments in the time. So you get this very thin quality that matches the music really, really well. And then going further down into the bass, yeah, you get a little bit of that growl that we were talking about. It's not what I would say about a modern piano. I mean, it's a wonderful instrument, but it's a very kind of glossy, always very, very polished sound. But I really relish the more human aspects of these instruments.
That's very true.
Well, good. So I see some hands going up, so this is perfect. So I may have some more questions for you in a minute, but we should open the floor. So yes, go ahead.
I had a question for Keiran. I mean, I appreciated your sports car comparison because your low notes sounded very Ferrari-like in the acceleration through. But I had a question between one of the one piece and another.
Sure.
You put almost like a little fret on the. What was that intended
So
for?
this is a mute, and actually this is a period correct, I guess you could say. And nowadays they make mutes out of rubber, but this is a leather mute. And basically, I'll give a very quick demonstration. Just to, this is the cello without it, and then you put one on, and it's sort of like your una corda pedal. It gives it it just sounds a little little more nasal, a little more covered, and it's good for this kind of gentle music. That last piece was about nighttime and dreams,
No,
so
that's
it felt appropriate. Yeah.
very appropriate, very good.
I think I saw some other hands as well. Yes, go ahead.
So, compared to a modern piano, what's the difference between with a modern piano when it comes to the strings and the hammer itself?
So this is a hammer action that is actually the Viennese action, which is the modern piano. Well, okay, the Viennese action, there's a little bit, I would say, a little bit more control and delicacy because the actual hammer reaches to the back of the key, and the modern instrument is actually created on an English hammer action, which is more of a catapult. So there's something about that feeling of being able to touch the keys and almost feel the hammer more than that catapult action. I mean, the hammer is still striking the key, but it's connected to the back of the key in a more direct way.
Yes, go ahead.
What about pitch? What pitch are you playing at why?
So we've actually decided to use 430, which was a historical pitch at the time.
One of many. But
One of many.
One of many. So for a lot of Baroque music, for example, they'll do it at 415, which is a semitone below what is standard. And then, of course, that means that 430 is somewhere in the middle. So I imagine that's a particular challenge for the string players.
Yes. Neither of the pitches you want. No,
Yeah.
but it works.
How do you love doing Schubert being more romantic and playing it on these original instruments? I just love it because it just brings out something that I would love to hear. So how do you find that as compared to this doing original instruments, just doing Baroque music and not romantic like Schubert, letting in that? And how long did the Fortepiano? Did it go as long as Brahms, let's say, or
Yes, so we are basically, the modern piano that we know today is basically a model from the 1870s. So Brahms would have been aware of that instrument, but there's actually a quote where he says that he almost, in a large hall, he prefers the larger instrument, but he actually owned, this is a copy, or this is an original, but it's very close to the instrument that he was given by Clara Schumann that he had in his home for many years. So I would argue that actually a lot of his music, when he was growing up, he definitely knew of used these instruments, and I think a lot of his music still works very, very well on a more historical instrument.
So how do you as basically Baroque players love playing this particular music compared to what we usually do?
It's really interesting to be steeped in a Baroque world and play all earlier music for a while, and then really be able to see the innovations and feel like the structure and the vocal quality. And we love, like being in the sports car and playing all the very nimble, quick suspensions and releases of Baroque music. But then This allows for these beautiful long singing, I mean, he's such a vocal composer, but I think we're able, coming from the earlier time Baroque stuff, to maintain a lot of that speech-like element of what we're doing, and then be able to make these, spin these longer phrases with a longer bow than we necessarily have, and it's just it's very cool that we're able to go from, you know, just fast forward many
Well, personally, I just
centuries.
I love hearing this. I'd love to hear more of like the Schubert or other contemporaries with this kind of romantic, because I think it can be done. I mean, I think
Sure.
it's great that you're taking this on and just doing it. It's wonderful.
Takes more convincing for modern, you know, like
Yes, I know.
Baroque
that's
stuff.
the problem.
Okay, but
You know, there should be a transition there. That we're
Yes.
still, you know,
yeah.
It's happening, yeah.
Yeah, and taste change the movement. We're gathering more information still. It'll be, you read treatises and they say, oh, that person was sliding around, they sounded like a cat meowing. And, but you can choose, do you want to sound like the cat or do you want to sound cleaner?
And also, where would you get those particular arrangements? Because I've sung the Austrian Bossers to sing it, and it went on and on for hours. Because it had so many verses, but you shortened it in a way that this was much nicer than doing it song.
Well,
You can
yeah.
speak to
Did
that.
you
Just
get, like, where do these versions come from?
you can just take the original by Schumann, but it, you know, it, of course, you can just play it fewer times essentially because he has the different verses. You can just say, you know,
Yeah.
I'm not playing the words anyway, you know.
Well, I thought it was wonderful. I loved it.
Thank you.
So I think I'll take one more question from the audience, and then I've got one last for you, and then we'll maybe move to intermission. But go ahead.
Thank you. You play and speak so passionately about this keyboard instrument. I mean, all of you do. And I'm just wondering if there was a moment where you said, because you must have studied on the modern piano, and I'm just wondering if there was a moment or two moments where you just said, this is the direction I want to go, and this is where my heart is, and I'm pointed towards this.
So I actually came to historical instruments quite late in my studies, and the reason being there really weren't so many instruments for me to actually study on at the music schools I happened to go to. But it was kind of a fluke that I went to a Baroque summer festival, and it was Early Music Vancouver, and that's where I tried Fortepiano for the first time, and it was a 5-octave instrument. And it was almost immediate where I tried it, and I knew that I really felt that the music just works so well on these instruments, and it was definitely a novelty, but it definitely did not wear off. And because I always feel like I'm learning more and more about the composers and the music, and I just feel like I have an instrument which is also kind of a teacher. So it's kind of like a wonderful partner to play with, and it always gives so much back in a way that I would not have come up with if I had just played this music only on a modern piano. So for me, that was really an immediate reaction. And I came back home, I changed my dissertation topic and decided to, travel wherever I could, meeting builders and restorers, and I sort of knew that I wanted to devote my playing to these instruments. So, what about the two of you?
Do you want to feel that or?
Well, I can say that I think we both came from conservatory study, and there's so many wonderful things you learn, but a lot of it is to play louder and faster, and those are wonderful, wonderful things to do and very essential. And as I said before about the color palette, I think it was suddenly just having permission and license to try something and be in this totally different world, and just further open up what we already had been studying, which is maybe geared towards consistency, and instead we went the route of instruments that never stay in tune, and there's sort of a thrill, a bit of like a masochistic thrill to it of like but you're surrendering a bit to something in order to get to the heart of something, and it does, as Andrea said, have that human quality to it. And at some point I think we both do both instruments, but this feels also tactily very satisfying, because you do feel that connection and that the depth with the gut strings, and it's just yeah, it does feel like a conversation with the equipment.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fun to kind of straddle both worlds. Like we still, you know, one week maybe we'll play sub in the TSO, and then the next week a TOEFL music project, and it kind of satisfies all those different things you want to explore. And I think if you just have one way you go, it's really boring. I mean, for me, I'm sure you can find all sorts of different nuance and everything, but I think it's really exciting to have different options and different routes to explore. So that's, I think, what really attracts me to it.
So thank you very much for that question. That's actually very similar to what I was going to ask as the final question. And I hope it won't become redundant at this point, but I hope it'll give you a chance maybe to expand and to give us a few more specifics. But my question was going to be, you just in your answer talked about the fact that the instrument is sort of a bit of a teacher, that you learn something from it. So my question to conclude this Q&A period is, what is it exactly that it teaches you? Or another way of thinking about it might be, what inspires you about using these instruments? What inspiration does it offer to rediscover or to retry repertoire that you might have initially learned on a modern instrument, but to do it on these, what inspiration does that offer, or what lessons does that offer?
So for me, it really affects the color, the difference in timbres and the colors really show that you can have a little bit more freedom in taking time and allowing all of these different elements to actually speak. So for me, it actually ushered in a new sort of concept of timing and phrasing, and yeah, that's what I would say.
I think for me, it teaches you really how to use the bow more in this repertoire, because in conservatory training, although our teachers do say, you know, really pay attention to your right hand, we often focus so much on what's going on the left hand and vibrato, and we do a lot of expression just with vibrato. But you can't rely on that in this period because they used a lot less of it, or different kinds of it. So you have to really get used to being expressive with this hand, which is really great for any musician to do, I think, any string player. Yeah.
And then to speak a little more just about general inspiration, for anyone, the context is so interesting of why play music that's hundreds of years old, unless, I mean, so much of what we're taught to build is imagination. It's kind of that balance between scholarship and things we learn and what we should do, and then what we want to do. And this, to me, to play on equipment that is from the time, it just like really gets your imagination firing, or seeing like the spaces or the palaces or wherever it was, whatever the situation is. It just brings you closer to the music, and it's not to recreate what happened, but it's really to expand and really spark more of an understanding of why the composer wrote what they wrote, and how to make it more personal and just feel really like what you're giving is your true interpretation of, you know, this day and age, how we can all relate to the same things, the same music that you know, that they were writing so long ago.
There you go. Well, thank you very much for answering all those questions.